Hi, I'm Novel Mike, and this is my opinion. So, Final Fantasy 15 is now out, so let's talk about it since I've played pretty decent amount of it. I'm gonna try not to rant about things because there are some big problems in this, but I want to hold absolute judgment on it until I actually finish the game, which may be a while because it's a pretty big game. But there are some problems that I think the game has, but there are some good things as well. I think that the best way I can actually explain my overall thoughts on it is that it is not a good or a bad game. I wouldn't say it's necessarily mediocre, but for every good thing, there's something bad with it. Excuse me. And for every bad thing, there's something good with it. So for that, I mean, if you look at the combat, for example, the combat is flashy. It's very nice looking. It is very serviceable. It works for the most part. But underlying that, there are problems with it. Part of the problem is that because it's not a typical action RPG, instead of like trying to mash or time like buttons down to do combos, you just hold the attack button and it does it for you. So because of that, you're actually drawn out of the battle somewhat and you're not paying as much attention to what you're doing. And because of that, it's easy to lose track of what's going on with certain enemies. And it's easy to get like hit from behind and stuff like that because you're not focusing on that as much since you're just holding down a button. You're not reacting to what's going on in the battle itself, really. Now, there are some caveats to this. They do have a guard and parry system where essentially when an enemy attacks you, you can guard and then parry them, which is good. And that is the whole combat system feels very reminiscent of Kingdom Hearts. The problem is that the way that they decide to do this is essentially a quick time event. So when an enemy attacks you, you'll have a button press on the screen where it says to press square to guard. And you'll do that, and what you really do is hold down. You don't actually time it, which is another problem, is there's no timing involved. So it takes some of the skill out of the combat system. So you'll do that, and then it'll tell you to hold circle again to parry, and then you'll parry, do a lot of damage, and then you'll go back to your normal attack routine. And there's other things involved with the combat system too, like warp strikes, blindside, stuff like that. And there is some depth to the combat system. But the basic premise of it is so simple, it's hard to get into it as much as I would like it to be. I think if it was more reactionary and more input driven from the player, then I think that it would work a lot better than just holding down a button. It seems like a very simplistic choice to make it a little bit simpler for people to grasp and to make it somewhat differentiated from the Kingdom Hearts series, which the combat seems very much based off of. Another thing is, like, while it is very flashy and, really cool and it moves really fast, I think that's actually a detriment to the actual combat system because that is essentially why it needs a big QuickTime event to actually have you in a big little message pop up on the screen saying, hey, press, triangle, or not triangle, press square now to guard, is because it moves at such a fast pace. If it didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to properly time guarding at all. And I think that there may be a way to turn it off. I haven't messed with the options enough to see that there is. From what I've noticed, it definitely seems like something that is obviously needed for the combat system to flow properly, because otherwise you would have to play the game for hundreds of hours to understand every little nuanced attack when you need to guard against certain enemies. And while that could be a good thing, when the combat moves so fast, your window of opportunity of actually knowing when to properly guard and counterattack with parrying and stuff like that is a lot harder to judge. But enough about the combat. The open world is very nice and colorful, and it is very big. It's very interesting to see some of the areas that you get to go and explore, and the art design in general for this game is fantastic. But the world also feels very shallow and empty because most of the things that are out in the open world and along with side quests are all very shallow. It's, oh, hey, here's some items, here's your resource areas, go to a little note on the map and here's a treasure chest, or here's, 3 little foraging areas or whatever. And along with that, the quest system is very bare bones, where it's essentially go here, find this item, or go here, kill, this set of enemies or this sub-boss, that kind of thing, and that's it. It feels very early MMO-ish, and it doesn't have a lot of complexity to it or a lot of depth to it besides that. And there's a few quests that are standouts, but for the most part, it does feel very lackluster compared to games like Witcher 3 and other games like it. It reminds me a lot of Dragon Age Inquisition in a lot of ways, honestly, with how that game was built and how people seemed to really like it at first, but as time went on, people noticed the problems with it, and then people ended up just not playing it and just not looking back on it very well. And if you remember, Dragon Quest Inquisition did get Game of the Year a couple years ago when it came out, so I think Final Fantasy 15, for all the praise that it's getting, is not going to be remembered as well as the praise that it's getting right now. I don't think it's a bad game, though. There are elements that work really well, like the four main characters being this, okay, it's a boy band kind of element, but these four best friends, essentially, that does work, and there is depth to the characters. A character like Prompto, who I was afraid was just going to be the comedic, blundering idiot of the group, because every character or every series seems to have that. He does have depth with him, and one of the first scenes that you get where it's like a personal event with him, he explains how he doesn't feel like he necessarily fits in because, he's just this random guy and he's surrounded by Noctis, who's a prince, going to be a king eventually, and he's just basically Noctis' friend. There's Gladios, Noctis' bodyguard, where he's this big, muscular, strong warrior, and then you have Ignis, who is this, strategist / advisor and has been raised essentially by nobility and royalty to be that for Noctis. And here's Prompto, basically just this fun-loving guy who likes to take pictures. And he explains how he feels inferior to them because of that. And, as Noctis, you can choose to be a dick or, play it off as not a big deal, or you can be like, hey, you're not that. We care about you. You're our friend. And you have a place here. And I'd like to see depth of characters like that. It's just a shame that outside of the four main characters, there doesn't seem to be a lot of that. The side characters are virtually non-existent, and the main female lead is honestly just god-awful. Not because she's a bad character, but just because she's not a character, really. She is a plot device. The game uses her to move the plot forward, and nothing else. And I mean literally nothing else. There is no objectively point to her character besides her motivations just simply being she loves Noctis and she needs to advance plot at this point, and this point, and so that's the entire point of her character. And I don't want to get into any kind of spoilers for the story, so I won't talk in length about that. But along with Luna, that is probably the biggest disappointment with the game, is that the story, it isn't necessarily a bad story per se, but the way it's told is just horrendous. If you have not watched the Final Fantasy Brotherhood anime or the Final Fantasy Kingsglaive movie, you will have virtually no idea what is going on at any given moment in the story, because the game basically assumes you have seen those things. And it's very irritating for that reason, because the story of the game should stand alone by itself. And if you want to know some of the more complexities with these four friends and how they became friends and all that, you need to watch the anime. And if you want to know exactly how the story from the prologue to, chapter 2 and all that take off, you need to have watched Kingsglaive, because it explains what the, whole reason for this war is now that Noctis is involved in, and why the Empire took over his kingdom and all that, and what happens with his father. And the problem is how it's actually told in the game. So essentially what happens is at the end of chapter 1, you have a cutscene essentially showing elements from Kingsglaive, showing you what happens in Kingsglaive in a very quickly edited 3 to 5 minute manner, which could work in theory, but the problem is there's no narration and there's no voiceover of any of the characters going on in anything that's happening in those quick scenes to explain what exactly is happening. It just kind of happens, and you're just supposed to visually understand that the Empire has betrayed them and they've taken over the kingdom. And that's it. And from there, literally the story is continued with just them hearing about it offhand, the four main characters, from a newspaper article. And that is unfortunately something that tends to be a common point with how the story is told. Instead of actually having, an interesting and expanded story where you have these elements being told to the character as they see it, almost everything is either told off screen and then the characters hear about it literally just off screen, or it all happens off screen and the characters are telling the player about it in just casual dialogue. And that is a terrible way to tell a story. And there's certain elements within the story that seem very interesting, like the motivations of different characters. But the way that it's told to the player and to the rest of the cast, it is very nonsensical, and it's probably up there with Final Fantasy XIII as one of the worst stories and the worst way to tell a story, just for different reasons. And that makes me terribly sad, because I think that there could be a really good story here. I think there's some really good characters here, but they're just vastly overshadowed by the negative elements that represent within both of those categories. There's other things I can talk about too, but I don't want to make this video too long. But I think the best way I can sum up my thoughts is I'm still going to play the game. I can't tell you if you should buy it or not. If you absolutely love story like I do, and you want to see the story, and you've seen Kingsglaive and you've seen the anime and all that, and you haven't bought the game already, yeah, you'll probably still be able to get into it and enjoy it. But as someone who isn't into all those things, and if you want a properly told story, if you want a proper open world, if you want a big expansive RPG that does something new, this isn't that game. This game borrows almost all of its elements from other games, including Square Enix own games and other series. And because of that, it feels like a very big mess. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing by calling the game a mess, but that is what it is. And I'm still going to keep playing it. I hope to be surprised and see the plot really advance and really get more detail on these characters. But from what I already know, I know that isn't the case, and I'm probably going to do a very big rant video after I finish the game, so be prepared for that. But for now, I still think that there is a lot of good with this game. I see why it's being praised the way it is, but I do think a lot of the things people are praising are very shallow, and that although the game is very pretty all of the time, that can't make up for some of the elements that just do not work at all. And I don't think the game will be remembered as fondly as it is a few years from now. Anyway, I'm Novel Mike. That was my opinion. I do hope that those who are playing Final Fantasy 15, you are liking it, and that it does get better for me as well. But from what I've played, it's just not quite there yet. I think it could have been better than it was, and I definitely think the story is probably the thing that is going to piss me off the most. But anyway, that's all I have to say for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Have a great day, everybody. See you later. Hi, I'm Novel Mike, and thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed this, please like and leave a comment down below, and if you really liked it, please share it with your friends. If you would like to see more from me, check out the other videos on the screen right now, and if you would like to see more content from me in the future, click the subscribe button. Thanks! Bye!